Chapter 9, Mishnah 3, in Masechet Brachot in the Mishnah, tells us that one who recites a prayer, who offers a prayer about a past event, has said an inappropriate prayer. Continues with a couple of examples. If a man's wife is pregnant and he says, God grant that my wife bear a male child. It's inappropriate for a number of reasons, but that is an inappropriate prayer. If a person is coming home from a journey and hears cries of distress in the town and says, God grant that this is not from my house, that is an inappropriate prayer, according to the rabbis. The Oxford philosopher Michael Dummett once argued that this Mishnah is in error because it seems to be saying that God cannot do what is logically impossible, namely to change the past. But in a Jewish Review of Books article on the limits of prayer, the New York University professor Moshe Halbertal explains that the point of this Mishnah is not that asking God to change the past is logically impossible. Quote, the basis for the rabbi's limitation on prayer is not the limits of logic, but the limits of complaint. The limits of complaint for Jews. Put bluntly, grown-ups shouldn't expect perfection, even from God. The rabbis of the Mishnah insist on a complex attitude towards evil, writes Halbertal. When bad things are still avoidable, a person ought to fight them with all of his strength. She should act on her own and petition God up to the very last moment. But once the events have actually occurred, we should shift from demand to acceptance. Emmanuel Levinas once wrote that the adult God is revealed through the void of the child's heaven. A child asks God to change the past. And if God doesn't listen, concludes that God is either wrong or weak and walks away. But an adult learns to love, even and perhaps especially through imperfection. In this week's Parsha, Moshe sins. God decrees that he cannot enter the land, and some people complain and cry out how unfair it is that someone as good as Moshe Rabbeinu is denied his life's dream for committing just one sin. Other rabbinic commentators come up with so many ideas to justify God about what Moses' sin was that by the 19th century, Rabbi Shmuel David Lutzato Shadal writes in his commentary, all my days I've prevented from myself, a rabbi preventing himself from exploring an issue in the Torah out of fear, lest out of my explanation, I'm going to come up with a new interpretation, and I will find that I've added yet another sin onto Moses, our teacher. Perhaps, like the Mishnah, what the Torah means to teach us this week is not something about God's justice or injustice, but that we shouldn't idolize our leaders. It doesn't matter what Moses' sin was. The fact is, he wasn't perfect. And we can still revere him. A grown-up view of the world is one that understands that even the things that you care most deeply about and the people you feel most passionately about are broken and flawed. On Thursday of this week, President Biden signed a law finally making Juneteenth a national federal holiday. The June 19 holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States was already celebrated as a state or ceremonial holiday in 47 states and the District of Columbia. On Thursday, Juneteenth became the country's 11th federal holiday. Today, it's an important day for many reasons, perhaps most of all, is that as it celebrates the end of slavery, it also reminds us of the ugly legacy of slavery with which our country still wrestles. When I was young, I was taught about slavery, but not really. We were not taught, as Isabel Wilkerson writes in her book, Caste, how, quote, the institution of slavery was for a quarter millennium the conversion of human beings into currency, into machines who existed solely for the profit of their owners, to be worked as long as the owners desired, who had no rights over their bodies or loved ones, who could be mortgaged, bred, won in a bet, given as wedding presents, bequeathed to heirs, sold away from spouses or children to cover an owner's debt, or just to spite a rival or settled score. They were regularly whipped, raped, branded, subjected to any whim or distemper of the people who owned them. Some were castrated or endured other tortures too grisly for these pages, she writes. Tortures that the Geneva Conventions would have banned as war crimes had the conventions applied to people of African descent on this soil at the time. But before there was a United States, writes Wilkerson, there was enslavement. Theirs was a living death, passed on for 12 generations. We were not taught about these things in depth because we were children, and adults were afraid that teaching these things would undermine our faith in America as a wonderful country. In a sermon about race relations given a year ago by my friend and teacher, Rabbi David Wolpe, he put it succinctly. Part of the problem with race relations in this country is that the conversation is being had by people who think like children. People who admit no fault or no virtue, who insist that America is perfect and saying otherwise is traitorous, or who insist that America was born in sin and that speaking its praises is somehow ultra-nationalist fascism. It didn't used to be that way. Our discourse didn't used to be that way. In 1852, Frederick Douglass was invited to address the citizens of his hometown of Rochester, New York, on the 4th of July. In his talk, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" Douglass reminds his audience, "The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious ironies. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear mournful wail of millions." whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, quoting the Psalms, he says, may my right hand forget her cunning. May my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, says Douglas, to pass lightly over their wrongs and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. But Douglas, in 1852, while slavery still exists in the United States, includes in his speech not only reproach. I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic, he says. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, he says in understatement. And yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They were peace men, but they preferred quiet revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men, says Douglas. They were great in their day and their generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. His words still echo true. The establishment of Juneteenth as a federal holiday, the celebration of the end of slavery, and the continuing reckoning of our country with its sinful past deepens and does not diminish my love for America. I love this country for which my grandfather and father fought in the First and Second World Wars. A Jew who knows history should love America too. Has it been perfect? Have we known no anti-Semitism or discrimination or vulnerability in this land? Of course not. But it has been a gift to millions of Jews fleeing pogroms and persecution. Has it offered freedom and opportunity beyond the wildest dreams of our ancestors? Yes, it has. To quote Rabbi Wolpe again, travel the world, listen to what America has done in various countries, and some of it will make you ashamed. Think about the treatment of African Americans in this country for hundreds of years, and you must be ashamed. But if all you feel is shame, then you are a child. Travel the world. Listen to how America has acted in other countries and feel proud. Think of the struggles that people in this nation have gone through for liberty and freedom and to overturn tyranny both within and without, and you must be proud. The Talmud in Masechet Shabbat tells us, make for yourself a heart of many rooms.
Services. So
the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat tells us, make for yourself a heart of many rooms. Friends, we can do this. I am ashamed of America's shameful legacy of slavery, and I celebrate the day when its slaves were freed, and I celebrate the fact that we remember all of this. I'll conclude that on Tuesday, I leave for Israel, and another summer of study at the Shalom Hartman Institute. And as I was reviewing the draft schedule that was sent to us for our program, I saw that on Thursday, July 1st, our group will travel to Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem and meet with Palestinian residents and hear their stories. And on that very same day, we will hear a briefing from Tal Becker, a distinguished legal expert, and hear a briefing on the complexity of those legal cases. On July 7th, we will tour Lod and meet with Arab Israelis and wrestle with the future of Israel's coexistence between Jewish and Arabs. Some things about Israel make me ashamed, and some things about Israel make me proud. And I hold both of these things in my heart, and doing so deepens and does not diminish my love for Israel. Stop praying for perfection, tell us the rabbis. Stop complaining to God for things that cannot change. Let go of your need for Moses or America or Israel to be perfect. Because by embracing imperfection, we grow our souls in compassion and in love. Shabbat Shalom.